Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Next 2.0 on WQLN PBS NPR. The show is produced by the Public's Voice Media. I am your host, Marcus Atkinson. I have my guest host on set with me, Marc Blount, and we've got a special voice here, our intern, our producer that you very rarely hear from, Aaron Cronin. Aaron, thank you for sitting in with us.
Of course.
If you want to know more about the show, you can go to Facebook and like the page. You can also follow us on Instagram at Next 2.0 Erie. There you can keep up with upcoming show promos, events, and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've been following WQLN, not just on the fourth Sunday of the month, but on our podcast platform or on social media, you will have noticed that there have been several efforts to interview candidates. We had Marc Blount and Chuck Camarata interview mayoral candidates, Mayor Schember. They interviewed Daria Devlin. You had myself and Sonia Baez interview all of these other candidates for various positions throughout the city. We had Marc Blount go one-on-one with Jasmine Flores. So there's been a lot of conversations had. And now that the evidence is in, we come back together for the different revelations that we've seen from the campaign results. And I got to start with the obvious. Joe Schember has been dethroned as the mayor of Erie. Thoughts, gentlemen?
I think it's pretty crazy. As you know, a younger person who's not as...
When you say younger, Aaron, tell us your age.
I am 23, so you know.
Never mind. Cut off your mic, Aaron. Too young for opinions. No. But it is nice to have a young opinion at the table. Go ahead with your comment.
I was just gonna say that like reading up on it is very like it's unheard of that someone would since 2005 it says since someone has gotten like overthrown in the mayoral race, and just the fact that like from my point of view, it's like it seems like he's been in office for a long time.
Feels like it.
It feels like from me like. At least with local politics, it's really hard to, because once people find that like person they're comfortable with, that they feel like is doing a good enough job, it's hard to get that change to happen, like where people want try something new, you know?
Yeah. Marc, what are you thinking?
After interviewing Daria, I had said to Daria, if she can transfer the energy that she gave off during that interview to her campaign, she would have a good shot. And I said this to her at stops where I seen her campaigning. This isn't a testament to hard work and dedication to Daria, actually. And I'm not saying anything negative about the current mayor. The current mayor, I believe, low turnout hurt him. I think people got comfortable. If they felt strongly about him, I think some people felt he had this, and I don't know if all his supporters came out. I don't know if any supporters came out because of the turnout was so low.
Right.
However, when you combine that with an energetic candidate like Daria, she went out there and earned every vote that she got.
Yes, she did.
And she was fighting like an underdog, and she convinced people, and she went out there and earned every vote that she got. So I'm not really surprised per se. Especially with, they didn't say it, and I don't think it was hinted at as much, but I think the optics was there. Was the mayor categorized like a Joe Biden? And did that Joe Biden effect hurt him?
Yeah, I thought about that as well, Marc. And that's been the rap for quite some time, right? And I was wondering whether or not that would hurt. But when you look at the debate between those two and Sheila Woger, I thought the mayor did well, right?
I did.
Yeah, I thought he did well. And then when you listen to the interviews, and so that's not to negate what you're saying, because I know a lot of people feel that way. I know a lot of people have questioned, well, who's really in charge, right? And I was curious. I'll throw it back to you, but I was curious, is that national narrative going to bleed over into this campaign?
Well, I heard hints of something that was dropped by Daria's campaign or by supporters of Daria, where there was rumors of Renee running the mayor's office, and her name became part of the campaign, which was hinting at, was he really running the mayor's, the fifth floor? And I think with some people that resonated. But however, I hope not, but I think that had a little to do with it. How much in a low turnout? Every little bit matters, man. Every little bit matters, and that says a lot about us, and says a lot about some of our candidates that turnout, because they have to have ownership in that.
Yeah.
They have to say what inspired people to come to the polls, and maybe it wasn't a lot of inspiration. Period. And this is where we end up. I think in a low turnout, you can have upsets happen.
Right.
A lot.
I think in the spirit of full disclosure, and I may have mentioned it in the past, I think I did in my intros, but I'll say it again. I did not interview either candidate because with what we do at the Eastside Renaissance, there's a lot of crossover with the mayor's administration. There's been a lot of crossover with Daria as well, and some of the things that we're doing in terms of our real estate neighborhood development. And so I didn't want to come across partial, and I thought to myself, okay, if you ask certain questions, is he being too tough? You ask certain questions, is he going too easy? And so with Chuck and Marc, I understood that these two had their pulse on the community from two very different perspectives. And both interviews turned out really, really well. Just to give some actual stats to it, just a few anyways, Daria ends up with 5,117 votes, which was roughly 50% of the voter turnout. Mayor Schember, 4,694, 46%. And then Sheila Woger, 359, 3.2%. Add to that the fact that, as you pointed out, Marc, the turnout was low, but so much so, I'm listening the other day to Philip Ward, right, on television. And this I thought was fascinating, and actually so did he and several others, which is why he did a show on it. This is on WSEE. It says in the city of Erie during Tuesday night's Democratic primary elections in the city, county, and mayoral races, voters had a clear priority on which race they felt compelled to vote in, as 3 times the amount of voters voted in the city council races compared to the mayoral race. So you had 3 times the amount of people who could have said, while I'm here, let me cast it. In your mind, let me start with you, Aaron, because one of the things I was curious about with Daria, and I mentioned this when I interviewed her with Sonia at Legendary Coffee House. A lot of Daria's accomplishments are not known to everyday people. You mentioned new market tax credits and ECAD and what she's doing with Build and now the Hammett Health Foundation. It's a lot of things that is kind of inside baseball. People like myself and Marc know all the players involved, but when I talk to people at in-laws and family cookouts and things along, they don't know the ins and outs, ARPA dollars, and they're like, huh? With the generation that you're connected to, how much of an awareness was there for Daria, to the best of your knowledge? And we know this represents just a small snapshot.
Yeah, I mean, like, as someone who is more like invested in politics already, I think even so, I have a like different like viewpoint than an average person my age. Even so, just because like I follow like their social media pages. I'll see like their reels. Like Daria was really good about being online, about being everywhere, like as she could, and I think that definitely helped out a lot. But like when you get to the more like I guess jargon, the inside terms, like
Yeah.
before you were talking about like infinity Erie, or is that what?
Infinite Erie.
Infinite
See, that's a
Erie.
perfect example.
Yeah, that's something I had to look up myself, and it's like a lot of that kind of like I guess knowledge. I guess it's for people like me. It's hard to know where to start to get all that information down.
Mm-hmm.
Like talking about like the 100K goal is a lot easier to understand. It's like, oh, we want our population to get above or at 100K. That's a really easy idea when compared to like talking about Infinite Erie, which is
Yeah.
a more like I guess nebulous idea,
Right.
where it's like, oh, this is a bunch of groups of people who are trying to renovate Erie.
Right. Those are excellent points. It made me think about a couple things to your point. Younger voters, I'm anxious to see the numbers because I just have to believe that there are some new voters, a good number of new voters in that number. Because I think she did do a wonderful job of using new media to her advantage. And Marc, I have to say this as well. I think she did a great job of walking that tightrope of being firm with her point without coming across as insulting and condescending toward Mayor Schimber, because Mayor Schimber is very well liked, right? And I was wondering, like, okay, Daria, how you going to do this? Because you want to assert yourself at the same time. If it feels like you're coming at him too aggressively, that may turn people off. As someone who has handled and worked around a lot of campaigns, what were your thoughts on how she handled the current mayor and his circumstances?
I thought she got a little bit more aggressive as we came close to the date. I also thought that her grassroots, because as we said, we might not know, or the public might not know what she did, but however, she was more on the ground naturally.
Yeah.
Than what Joe shows up. Hold on, I want to make sure you notice
that
Joe
does.
will show up at funerals. Joe will show up in neighborhoods. He was everywhere.
Joe came to my house and prayed with us after we had an incident in my home.
Yes. So
literally,
again, I will always respect Mayor Schimber for that. And I had a relationship with him, and I always say, I admire his stance on racism and in the way that he stood up for some of the new Americans. I think that part was good. But however, Daria works with those people organically.
Yeah.
And so she was building a brand. It's almost like she was coming out of the school district, because that used to be the pattern. The pattern was you was either a teacher or coach or whatever, and you came out the school district, and that led to the 5th floor. Tulio came out the school district. Savacchio came out the school district. Mo might have benefited from coming out the school district,
which is a huge voting block, mind you.
Now, when you say ECAC and you say certain things, people think Daria. And then now you sprinkle some of the so-called, I guess, I don't know for a fact, but the Erie insurance support or Hammett support. She had the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Where I don't know if Joe, we had a touchy-feel thing, but however, Daria established some serious relationships. I looked at some of the support that she had on social media. She had Black Wall Street supporting her right off the gate. She had young people like Deontay Cooley. She attracted a lot more of those, whereas I saw Schimber had the more established people, I thought. Like he showed Bishop Brock in his thing, and that was the established. Whereas I didn't see any of the up-and-coming support. I didn't see that. And that might have played a role. Like you said, we have to do an autopsy to see who voted.
Who voted, right? And what that looked like. I think in terms of mayoral races, Mayor Schimber is 2-0, and here's what I mean by this. Twice, he made the city proud in terms of how he conducted himself.
Definitely.
On the campaign trail. And as polarized as this campaign environment is, as this political environment is, he has to you have to give him that credit. And that, to me, is one of the best parts of his legacy, is that he brought that back to it. Now, to Daria's credit, much like Persinger as the opponent then, Daria did the same thing. I think Erie was well represented on both sides. Lastly, I'll say, and I want to bring Aaron back in a little bit on his thoughts from a younger demographic. Lastly, I want to say that everything is seasonal, right? And I look at Warren Buffett stepping down, and certainly Warren Buffett's been on the scene forever, different conversation. But my point is, he reckoned now's the time to step down. Mayor Schimber didn't step down, but the fact that he's now being replaced for this type of mayor is not a bad thing, because I do think that her energy, her profile matches where we are right now. And listen, shout out to Mayor Schimber. I think Mayor Schimber is exactly who we needed when he came along. He's exactly who we needed. And there is zero shame in the fact that this one didn't pan out. Sheila Woger, those close to 400 votes, probably could have used those, right? And somewhere there was a lack of proper voter education or voter appeal because of that turnout. 3 times as many people are there already. You mean to tell me you haven't seen me in years, and you stopped by my duplex and you knocked on my neighbor's door and didn't come see me? I'd be calling you like, Marc, my neighbor's right next door. You didn't come see me?
Yes.
They showed up and didn't color in. That's why.
Yeah.
And so, Aaron, I'll throw it back to you. The 100K thing, I think, was one of the parts that goes into voter education, because you ask the average person, well, why is it important that we have 100,000 constituents or more? They're like, I don't know. People keep talking about, I don't know. I do think there needs to be a stronger voter education piece that people just infuse into their day-to-day rhetoric as politicians, right? Your final thoughts on the mayoral race, the turnout, and then let's segue into city council. How'd you feel about the city council's race? Did your candidates pull through? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, honestly, just going quickly back to like I guess it's very refreshing to see like political campaigns that aren't like cutthroat, nasty stuff like that. I think that's one thing like people who are like me, who are like a little bit tired of everything that's going on. It's very refreshing to see candidates who are clearly trying to represent us as the best that they can. And when it comes to like what when you were talking about like voter like I guess information and
Yeah.
how to teach people like that, is I I don't know what's the best way, but I guess having the like information out there, like podcasts like this or like the news and stuff like that. Uh, I guess there's just one thing people, I guess, like me, underestimate with local politics is just how influential it is. Like, uh, on the local level, your like rights as an American are very much more determined by, I guess, local politics and stuff than a lot of people understand. Like business level, personal level, like what like I guess your like what you can do with your free time and stuff like that. A lot of that's affected. And then with the 100K thing too, it's like that's then another level above that, like how governmental funds get allocated and stuff like that. And it's just very interesting how I guess dense it can be. So I guess finding a way, and I think that's what Daria could bring to the table, make that more digestible, make it less dense.
Interesting point.
And I think because she's already showed she's willing to use like social media and like newer forums and like getting that grassroots approach. I think those things only help her with like if she starts a I guess campaign to help people with this information.
Yeah.
I think that could only benefit her and other people in the future.
I do a lot of mentoring through my organization, 100 Black Men of America. We stop into these schools, and every week we have sessions, and we do a lot of life skills, decision making, so on and so forth. And oftentimes we pull on examples from the past, current examples. And as I'm making a point, I find myself saying, have you heard of X? Yes or no. Do you know what that means? No. Let me explain what that means. Blah, 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 blah. And here's why I'm explaining that to you. Then I will move on to the point so that they see how it applies to their little 13-year-old lives. I feel like more of that needs to go on from a political level because the average person is just more preoccupied or maybe even just apathetic to the scene. Marc, you always say that all politics is local. It's a big Fred Rush line as well. And so as he talks about that, what are your thoughts? Because that's something that I know you preach on a regular basis.
I personally think what we've seen in this election was purposely kind of done at the macro level, not at the micro. Because a democracy or the form that you have can't work. It doesn't work well for the common person if you don't vote. But it works well for the interests that, I don't want to say suppress the vote, but I think it's so much apathy, so much helplessness being promoted that people don't vote. And you mentioned education as far as voting. I mean, like it's just not us to educate people about our government. It's the schools. It's just as we're trending towards, okay, we're saying, hey, now we need more financial literacy. Man, I still say we need more government literacy because you don't understand where your taxes is going once you get your finance right. We don't have an understanding of our government. However, another interesting point I thought about was we're getting ready to go into the city council races. Yep. If you look at who won city council and by their literature, which mayor candidate did they support? I know 3 of them that was in the top 5 vote was with Daria.
Right.
And so
there's a tie in there.
I didn't see any of them
tie-in.
say the mayor. out of the top. I don't know if Vol is her name, one of the final 4 votes. Mo didn't really say. I didn't see Mo in any. I didn't see Mo endorse a mayoral
Which
candidate.
goes back to and then most popularity, I think, in large part goes back to what you said about that tie to the district.
Yes.
Huge voting block, huge Democratic voting block.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
However, I believe Andre endorsed Daria. I know Jasmine did, and I know Deontay did.
Yep.
And so you're looking at the top 5 vote getters right there, and maybe that resonated. Their following might have resonated with Darius.
I'm sure.
And those might be where those extra, as we find out where they came from, we might find that this is where those extra votes came from for her.
What's interesting about that is I saw the slate of the black voter that someone put out, and I want to say it was Black Wall Street, and it had those candidates on there. It had Mike Keyes on there, who lost. It had Perry Wood, which I cannot wait to get to that part when we talk about that election or that campaign. He lost as well, but I do think there was a tailwind, to your point where that's concerned. As we segue to city council, I had credit where credit is due. I'm 100% surprised that Andre did not run for mayor. I just feel like when it comes to the city especially, Andre Horton has a large following.
I think the timing wasn't right.
It could be. This is just me acknowledging that he has the following, the gravitas, and I feel like the background from the grassroots to the experience. And I think, people know Dre so much as a fighter. When you really listen to Dre, he's a fiscal hound. He knows what he's talking about. And that's not to say it like in a surprise manner, like I'm surprised. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that people recognize him more as a fighter. And I'm like, and I've had to say to people, but do you really listen to Dre? Because Dre really understands what's going on, especially when it comes to the money allocation, who's getting what, where does it come from, yada, yada, yada. And so in terms of the large turnout for the city council race, I no doubt think that has a lot to do with him. Now, Jasmine, same situation. You had people openly campaigning against Jasmine.
Yes.
And still, second most votes.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Definitely.
And
she's resonating with someone.
Exactly. City council race. Aaron, what are your thoughts here?
When I was looking over the, I guess, people who ended up, winning, there are a lot of names I ended up recognizing, actually, either just from listening to people who are more politically in tune than I talk about it, or a lot of people I know. I guess it speaks to the kind of like community we have in Erie, is that a lot of people I know who are making recommendations, who understood I guess the local politics. I recognize those names too as well. And I don't know, as someone who wasn't focusing as much on that aspect, I guess it just makes me realize how, I guess, interconnected the races are. I personally did not follow it enough to speak on either surprise on upsets or who goes who, but it did seem like a very Democratic heavy turnout and win. And I don't know if that was because of necessarily Daria's impact, or maybe people are on a more general level looking more towards Democratic leaders. But I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say.
Well, let me go to Marc with that, because Marc, on your own show, Blount Conversations, because if it was WQLN, we would have had to have introduced everybody at the midnight hour. You went one-on-one with Jasmine Flores.
Yes.
Help us understand what it is about her that you think resonates with so many people, because it obviously isn't just quote unquote young people. There's something about this young lady that people say, you know what, I like her.
First, I'm going to give a shout out to, for me, I can't tell Jasmine's story without mentioning Erie County United, because they did the groundwork for her and endorsed her when she first ran and put her name out there. And she was a good product. When you hear her, a lot of times, like you had mentioned about Andre for mayor and things like that. A lot of times, you could be the right candidate, but you don't have the resources to get your message out or to get your name out. Like Daria had
Resources.
some support.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm not so sure Jasmine or Andre will have the financial support for that type of race. However, at City Council, Erie County United kind of helped that with that type of candidate.
I remember that slate they put forth.
Definitely. Michael Keys and her rode in on that.
Mm-hmm.
However, Jasmine found her footing. And when you hear her, I saw Daria or that energy. I don't want to, I mean, like my co-host was just like looking at her and she went on her own. And I was impressed because that was really my first long conversation that I had with Jasmine up close. And I was very impressed with the maturation that I saw with her. And the ideas, because one thing, I don't vote you for youth. I don't say because you're young, we just need more young people.
Right.
No, I want the best candidate. That's what I want. And the productive one. And she seems to have grown into that versus the up and coming young person. No, now she's a formidable public servant. And you'll see it. And when she has that, she has that. Now, getting back to Andre, I wish the Democratic Party as a whole would listen to Andre as far as he has his pulse on certain things. And he's ahead of the curve when it comes to the party. But also, I would say this too. One thing that I did notice, the party itself, this is what I was going to ask you, not going back, but I found that interesting. The party itself endorsed Daria over an incumbent.
I thought that was strange. And I don't...
Usually they stay out of it.
I would love to bring some party bosses in and just really unpack that because, and listen, if somebody's listening that is a decision maker in the party, we'd love to have that conversation or discussion, even if we do it off the cuff for a segment. We'll come to you with some microphones. I was very curious about that same thing as well, especially seeing that Mayor Schember is the type of mayor that he is. You can have your issues with how he has legislated or governed, but I thought that was a rare move.
Definitely, because if we remember, let's flash back years and years ago, but just to educate some people, the Democratic Party locally almost broke up because of the Bernie Sanders and
I remember that
lack of that. And they endorsed somebody. So the endorsement can break up a party.
Yeah.
And the tradition normally was, okay, well, we're not going to, especially an incumbent.
But you know what, though, Marc?
That's a big flex.
It's a huge flex. But what it says, as we're talking about this, what it says to me is they felt like the will of the party overwhelmingly was on their side with that decision. Because you make a decision like that, there's no fear of fallout as you would traditionally fear. Because you're right, that could tear a party apart unless you feel, I think the majority of the people in the party right now are going to fall in line with this. And obviously they saw something because look at how it all turned out. From the candidates that endorsed Daria to Daria getting... So, but it's an interesting discussion.
Oh, no doubt.
Nonetheless, I want to go back to what you said about Jasmine and the maturation process. Chuck Nelson pointed something out, and we know it cerebrally, but we forget sometimes that you may look at city council in other cities, and so-and-so's the council person of the 5th Ward, the 3rd Ward, like the county, District 1, District 2, blah, blah, blah. All of the city council candidates or representatives are at large.
Yes.
You represent Erie.
Definitely.
Not East Side Erie, not Lower West Side Erie, which says you really have to have something to say, right? Platitudes are only going to take you so far. Pointing out what other candidates didn't do correctly is only going to take you so far. With it being an at-large position, what are you saying that would appeal to this broad swath of people, because this is the entire city we're talking about. So when you talk about Jasmine and she's maturing, I got the same sense when I was interviewing her. When she started talking about housing and giving her opinions on that and some thoughts on that, I thought, okay, she's been obviously studying this issue. And I love when that happens. But for people that want to be a part of and then Andre to me raises the bar on that, because when he hits the mic, he always knows exactly what he's talking about, right? To the details. And so I think that intellectually, and I give Chuck credit. Chuck he's a thinker. You know,
no
Chuck
doubt.
Nelson, love him or hate him, he's a thinker.
Yeah.
And I think Chuck did some things to help raise the bar. And Andre's going to do that in some ways that not just intellectually, but even from a grassroots standpoint. I think that subliminally, they may not, whether they know it or not, they're changing how people view, you want to run for city council, and especially with so much going on. And then Daria raises the bar from the mayoral office. This landscape, and I know I'm being long-winded, but this is one of the reasons I didn't interview either one of the candidates. This landscape is so nuanced in Erie right now. And I look at all that we go through as an organization, all that we go through as business people, and as advocates on various boards and things along those lines. You know, there's a lot going on in America right now, but boy, it's not, you know, this is Spot. Spot is a dog. See Spot run. It is nothing basic about the way this thing is running right now. It is detailed and it's nuanced, and you kind of have to, you have to know what time it is. Yes. And to be able to articulate that. And so for a moment like that, it's going to be harder for people to get elected with just, hey, vote for me, I'm a good guy. These guys been there too long. I need more.
Well, that's where I commend a young Deontay Cooley that garnered so many votes, finished fifth on his first run out of 4 candidates, 4 slots. I believe he combined his social media presence, his energy, and he hit his stride. But he hit a stride against some very established people. But it shows that there is a path. It shows if you work hard enough, if you knock on doors, and if you could get that feel. Because I had just left him, and I was wondering, I don't know if this is an issue oriented, because I can't say what any of them, like, what is your thing? What is it that you stand for? Like before, maybe years ago, I would say Andre is community benefits, or Jasmine might have been blights or whatever. There was really no wedge issue ran on. It's how you feel about them.
Sure.
Like Mo, I think a lot of people, Mo Troop gives you that. He gives you, he's wise, maybe level-headed. He comes out the district, and I think that helps. He comes out the school district.
Absolutely.
And people like Mo Troop. And I think maybe we need to look at that too, because he got quite a few votes too.
He did.
So maybe these people are building their pathway if one day to the 5th floor. So I don't know about that, but I would just say, yeah, it seems like Erie is a field market. There was no real one issue that I think that cost the mayor his issue. I just think they felt Daria more so than they felt the mayor. Yeah. What could you say he didn't do? And what could you say that the other council people, what do you stick to them? What is their issue? What is the number one issue in Erie? I don't know what it is.
I don't think there's a number one issue. I do think that there's enough going on right now that you can sink your teeth into something, right? And I think that all of the candidates that were successful, with maybe the exception of Mo, because I really could not put my finger on. I think that overall, Mo is just somebody that resonates with people, and I think he comes with a natural base that he was savvy enough to say, I think I can convert this into political capital. But with all of the things floating around out there, I think for these candidates that are being elected now, you can see a level of political aptitude in some of these, if not a lot of these key areas. And that's what I'm talking about. You know, I don't know some of the other Republican candidates that are putting their names into the hat here for the general. That's going to be interesting. But certainly I think that the future of Erie, this should be interesting to kind of watch how everything develops going forward. Before we go into the county executives race, school board. Any thoughts on school board? Aaron, did you follow the school board race? What were you thinking about that?
I think you've seen a major flex by Gary Horton, who didn't spend any money, didn't really have any signs, and he won.
with his history and with his
Definitely.
and his
he pulled a
following.
Bagnoni. You haven't seen a campaign like that since Bagnoni. Bagnoni wouldn't spend on that advertisement. He just say, "I'm here, and I want one of your votes, and if you choose me." And so I think you saw a little flex right there. I think now I once heard a speech by them, and they said maybe you have to look at the Hortons like a Borgia, like a Harkins. Their family name now is that type of name.
Mersky.
Now, Mersky's or what have you. Now, maybe proudly, I would say, we can add the Hortons to that. And then maybe Mo might be Meredith. Maybe the Merediths might be coming up next. I don't know, because Mo is a Meredith. So, and you had Larry Meredith, and you have Angela McNair, which is a Meredith.
Yeah.
So that you have that there, and maybe one day you'll hear from Angela again. So that's my thoughts on that on the school board. And then to Zach, he came back and he won. I see Jay Brennan, a name that's known and it's kind of worked itself out. He won his spot.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
I mean, Gary with the flex agreed. Not surprised. Certainly his history, his resume warrants that. And if he told me to my face, I'm gonna run and I'm not gonna do X, Y, and Z, and I think I got a shot, I wouldn't have argued with him a bit. Right? What I love about Gary being there is that Gary has always been pro-youth in this community.
Yes.
And he will go to it's a hill that he will die on, rightfully so.
No doubt about that.
Right? And so who doesn't need that? I think that the district's gotten to a certain place right now. Certainly we want to look toward the future, but I'm excited about the fact that he's back in there just to bring that experience back to the table and see what's going on with that. You mentioned names, Christine Rush McCullum.
Yes.
Christine Rush.
Definitely the Rush name is there. Yes. We made history on that one.
Magisterial justice. Unpack the history part.
Well, there was an African American that has won a district justice race. His name is Bill Cole, but he didn't pass a test, so he didn't get the seat. Because not only do you have to win the race for district justice, you have to pass a test for it. Ron Steele ran for it. He didn't win. Well, Christine Rush won the Democratic nomination for the seat. Normally, that means that you won. However, the candidate that she ran against cross-filed and ran and won on the Republican side. So this will be a sequel race. Unless this is what's interesting. Will the party say, step down? Will the party say, well, because this guy has moved, and I'm not going inside, but I'm saying if you don't win this race and you run as a Democrat again in something else, because he ran for something before and he moved to this district to run for this.
Specifically.
If you're going to run as a Democrat, but yet you won't cede to the Democrat nominee, what does that say? Are you really, or what is that? Because we have a process here. And are they going to ask him that? I don't know, because in the school board, you have the same type of situation. And most people would recommend it. And I would tell you this, if you're running for school board, you should try to cross-file, because you could have a part two. But the interesting thing is, what's the party's position on that? And that's
which
what I'm
you do need
see.
to be clear on.
Yeah. So I'm waiting to see, is there going to be an ask, or is he going to do the right thing, or will he see whether he can win or not, and he wants a relationship with the party to run again in some other office? What would you do?
I know that you mentioned before when it comes to the Hortons, like you'd love to be around when they caucus, just to hear what the political discourse at the dinner table would sound like. What you love about families like that are civic minded and they understand their civic responsibility to the community is that there is an internal accountability that comes along with that.
Yes.
Right? Outside of constituents saying, here's your job and we're going to hold you accountable. You got your own siblings and your own family members saying, so what's up with X, Y, and Z, right? And it makes me think about that when I think about Christine Rush. I mentioned that when Sonia and I interviewed her during that candidates forum, is if you know the Rush family, Very intelligent folk.
Definitely.
Very ambitious folk.
Definitely.
Extremely civic-minded. And those internal accountabilities are there. And so I told Christine, I said, listen, people don't have to worry about you doing your job if you take this to the finish line, because you veer off the beaten path. You got relatives that's going to be harder on you than any constituents. And she laughed and kind of unpacked that. But that family is serious about public service and politics.
No doubt about it. And hats off to Christine for passing the test. And she didn't quit. And hats off to Big Wash. Hats off to Selena King, which helped a lot. And again, when you say Rush, the Rush family, Big Wash is a part of
Big
that.
Wash, and a lot of people don't know that. Yep, Big Wash is he's from that Rush clan.
There, man, that was if you could ever have a foot soldier or a campaign manager or whatever you want to call him or supporter, you want someone like that behind you. And they ran a great race. And I'm proud of Christine, and finally she's been a public servant for a while, and hopefully she'll get what she worked for.
And so the public, I don't want to say public, the public acknowledgement that I want to put forth right now, Christine Vogel, I didn't know.
Yes.
I had no idea. I mean, when she came in with the interviews and she was with Kathy Dahlkemper, kind of tilted my head a little bit. I said, okay, this is a person who is, once again, very politically savvy.
Yes.
Understands, especially the lay of the land here, was county executive before. And when I saw that they were together, I thought, okay, she's getting great feedback, information, and guidance. I don't know her,
yes.
Right? And I wondered aloud, how many people know her? Sonia and I talked about that amongst ourselves, like not in a negative way. Like, this should be interesting. We don't know her. Went to dinner with some family members, and one of my family members who lives in Mill Creek said he voted for her. And I said, really? I said, what is it about her that made you vote for her? And, he heard her speak a couple of times. He espoused a couple of things. It sounded like he just flat out, she resonated with him. And so listening to Perry Wood's history, all that to say, the mayoral race was like, wow, that happened. The county executive's race, that was a shocker for me.
I think it was a shocker for me, and I'm sitting back for this, and I'm saying to myself, maybe it was me because of the positions that I'm in, and why I say that, EGRA. And I thought people pay attention to EGRA, and that's Perry Wood's thing. But
they do.
Now that I think about it, when I ask people about it, I deal with EGRA, or I see EGRA because of some of the things that I'm involved with. But to the common person, do they really know what EGRA does, or do they really know Perry Woods or whatever? Whereas this lady, when I hear her story, the pizza places, and again, she was connected to a lot of grassroots because of the businesses she was in.
Yeah.
Whereas Perry, and I like Perry, and I thought Perry was going to win. However, I think this was the establishment again, where I think he thought he was more established. And I'm not going to say he didn't knock on doors. This other lady took it from a practical business grassroots point of view.
Right.
Whereas Perry, I think his people around him, or the aura that I got was, this is my seat. And that's the aura I got. And I bought that message myself.
And Marc speaks on behalf of himself and not for
because this is what I saw. This is what I thought I saw. I said, why is Davis campaigning against her versus him?
That was the next point that I was going to bring up. Right.
Either somebody said something or he wants her. And he made her. I didn't know her stance on she's far left or whatever. I don't know her like
She'd
that.
be the worst thing to happen to the MAGA movement.
I thought you would attack Perry because you didn't want to see Perry.
We scratched our heads on that one as well. Like, what's the game plan there?
Yeah. So did he kind of like prop her up because he saw her as the weakest one and gave her free advertisement?
Or she's a genuine threat?
Or was she a genuine thing? I don't know. Only he knows that, or his people know that. But I found that very interesting because if I was him, which I'll be in a bad situation, but if I was him, I would have went after Perry. I would have thought Perry was the one coming out of that.
Right.
And that was just interesting. That was a major commercial at the end.
She beat him by over 1,000 votes.
Yeah.
She beat him by more votes than Daria beat Mayor Schember.
Yeah.
And Daria comes in with like an Erie name that you know. And so I don't think that's any indictment on Christine Vogel at all. I think that just me saying and admitting, obviously that is a race where I don't have my finger on the pulse of the county. And that's not saying anything. I mean, who am I?
No, you said a lot right there because maybe it was the county speaking. Maybe that's what happened.
I want that autopsy as well. I think there's a part 2 to this conversation where we can actually pull the numbers and actually speak articulately to, this is how these numbers break down. Either way it goes, it was impressive. When I interviewed her, she seemed likable enough. And with Perry came across as Perry. I know Perry. And so it's hard for me to determine how the average person perceives Perry. I thought that maybe they would take him as kind of high level. Perry tends to speak at that level or what have you. Some people may take it as condescending, not saying that that's what you are, Perry. That's not saying that that's who you are. But you just never know when it comes to these county races, especially. And so obviously something there landed.
I don't know if the average voter in Erie knew him like they knew, say, like an Andre or Jasmine or whatever. Now, okay, I guess I would be curious. How many votes was it compared to Jim Wirtz?
That's a good question.
Perry and him.
That is a good question. I don't have that in front of me.
Because if that was close, then maybe it could be something there or whatever. But if Jim Wirtz did more, that might prove my point. I don't know if we knew. I don't know.
I don't know that one either. I know that Wirtz won his seat.
Yes.
For county council.
Yeah.
And boy, I don't know, man. It was an interesting election cycle. But those 2 races, I know that all eyes were on, and for several reasons, the mayoral race had a lot of notes of that national platform attached to it, and the county executive's race had a lot of notes of that national platform attached to it. I interviewed Carl Anderson leading up to the election, not about the election, but about the DEI battle in Erie. And, I made the Washington Post, and the Washington Post talked about the county executive's stance on DEI and how that played out with the DEI commission and the different groups that were involved. And then he was comparing it to the national landscape of DEI with President Trump. And Erie, once again, a bellwether to, what's going on a national landscape? On the DEI thing, nationally or otherwise, Aaron, are you guys having conversations on the president's stance on DEI and maybe not as much on what's happened with the DEI battle locally, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, at least with I think when it comes to more broad stuff like that, I feel like that's everywhere. It's hard to escape, and for better or for worse, I feel like I guess when I'm talking to like people around my age, a lot of them kind of go through this phase where they feel like, oh, I don't want to. I just gotta shut it all out. I don't want to talk about politics. But once I feel like people get past that kind of thing, especially with DEI, or like with the budget cuts, or like the allocations, or like the Doge stuff. Once you get past that, you kind of realize that, like for example, DEI, you can kind of like, I guess, fight back in a way when it comes to local elections, and especially since like just counting people out, like just with how like the rhetoric right now is surrounding DEI, claiming that like, oh, unqualified people are in these positions of power, so we'll put these unqualified people in the United States government to cut those guys out.
Yeah.
And just like I feel like it's one of the topics I'm more like in tune with, and like a lot of people I know are more in tune with. Like there's like I guess on the national level, on like people striking like Target, for example, in order to like fight back against their like recoil from DEI. And like you hear about how like Instagram and like Meta have rolled back their DEI programs, and like you see it affect, I guess, on a bigger level. So I I don't see why, like, I guess I think my like people like me, more like, I guess, progressive people, they think, well, at least I can speak to what I believe in, is that like we need to not let this happen,
Yeah.
because if they pull back these rights, these like job opportunities, what comes next? Like, and it just, I guess, something that can feel like a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why local politics is so important.
I think you put your finger right on the issue because, and I think this is what attracted the Washington Post to Erie. Erie was a living snapshot of what does this look like locally, because it was mirroring the national. Along those lines, Marc, I wonder what your thoughts are. Andre was the only person of color on county council. First and only. And now he has, and that remained the case throughout his entire stay there. Came in as the only and is termed out as the only. And now with this new slate, there are, once again, no people of color. You have Daria, who is now in office, who I know her personally, is a person who believes in human rights across the board, right? She's the daughter of Father Simon, who is a social justice warrior, has been for quite some time. And so it's just who she is. It's in her DNA. She's a product of the Erie School District, and she has put a lot of time into our students. And if you know anything about the Erie School District, you know that it is the United Nations. But between however the county seat shakes up, what city council is looking like now, the school board, some of the images have changed, but it's pretty diverse. And now you got city council. What do you think the future of these battles of equity look like?
Well, one, as far as the school district is concerned, worst case scenario, the attack on DEI as far as at the public school level will come down to the destruction or the abolishment of the Department of Education. And what is going to happen is, or what has been proposed, is you send that money out to the states and the block grant. For right now, you have Mayor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. I don't worry about Pennsylvania per se when it comes to that.
Governor Shapiro.
Yes, Governor Shapiro. Because this already, all the school districts received a letter to say, explain, do you have it or whatever, and write it back to the Department of Education, ourselves, RB Wiley included. And it was the state that said, you don't have to answer that. And we're not answering that. And that's the whole thing. But however, I would say this, when did an idea become a policy? Or let's just say this, if you are DEI, why do you need a policy?
Right.
And then if you're targeted, whoever you are, if that's who you are, do you need a policy?
Right.
And so how do you pull back from who you are? No, I can say Wiley never had a DEI policy. I can honestly say that.
Yeah, you can get rid of the letters, but it doesn't kill the spirit of.
Yeah, because we are we fair. We are that. But however, I guess that gets used in a sinister point of view to cover somebody to say, well, we're DEI too. We don't have a policy, but I look at your staff, I look at how you spend your money, I look at all this. I don't see it there, but they can say, hey, Marc, we're DEI too, just like you. So some of these places, they needed a push. However, the Targets and the McDonald's or whoever is arguing about this and pulling these things back, I'm curious about that. Why are you adamant to say we're pulling back on it instead of just saying, why not double down on saying this is who we are?
And you know who's been saying that is Tim DeCastro. But Erie Insurance said, listen, and I'm not, he's made these statements at public meetings that we've had for the Community Foundation, different places. This is who we are. And so the spirit of take the letters, or do whatever you need with the letters, throw the letters out if you want to. Is that all we're talking about? Because the spirit behind it still lives. So what's your point? You're saying, why aren't more organizations coming out like that? Like, okay, we got rid of the letters. You happy now? We're still trying to do what's best for our company. And statistically speaking, a diverse workforce has plenty of positives to the bottom, even if you are thinking just from a pragmatic standpoint and not from a liberal agenda standpoint. It is pragmatically sound. So we'll keep doing it. Take your 3 letters back. You good? Why wasn't it that simple? I get where you're coming from.
And then I'm still confused. The Conservative Party or whoever it is that's behind this have done a good job of taking definitions of things and villainizing it and creating a new narrative. Woke was not an agenda. Woke was a state of mind, meaning I know what's going on. Somehow that became some affirmative action thing. It became something else because someone took our word and redefined it. It's that disturbs me. It's like, okay, on the same token, he's doubling down on Harvard to say, if you're anti-Semitic, he's hiding behind deporting people by saying, if you have an anti-Semitic policy or you protest, somehow my protest against the violence that's going on in Palestine makes me anti-Semitic.
Right.
You can't separate the two. Mm-hmm. So someone is telling me I'm anti-Semitic and therefore I should be deported, or therefore Harvard should lose funding if they don't stop that. Mm-hmm. If a student don't have the right to protest, isn't that American? One of our fundamental rights is the right to protest.
You're stealing my thunder because, and I want to unpack this in a future show, and I don't say this facetiously. I want to see if I can bring the right people on the show to unpack this, because if there is a such thing as being woke, quote unquote, and they've created a narrative around that, then I suggested you can create a narrative around the term being asleep. Because in order for you to really sign on to everything that Trump is espousing, he is asking you to abandon or to fall asleep to the principles that make America, quote unquote, great in the first place.
Yep.
The rule of law, freedom of speech, the right to due process, and the list goes on. And for you to ignore all those things, you have to be voluntarily asleep.
Well,
It's the opposite of woke. Go ahead.
At a very fundamental level, too. Like, you have to ignore what the president's supposed to do. He's supposed to uphold the Constitution.
Exactly.
And if he's trying to, like, I guess, get rid of that or, like, amend it without going through the, like, actual, like, process and stuff like that, then it could be a real problem. Like, especially since, like, I don't know, like, how with the, like, this kind of goes back to the whole DEI idea, where companies are already like employing his executive orders, even though they're not law. They're not law unless they're confirmed, but companies would rather be more asleep, be more, I guess, pragmatic towards what he's saying.
Yeah, and complicit, right.
And they just go with what he does instead of like waiting for the actual, like, I guess, checks and balances to be ironed out.
And then to honor the checks and balances when they come back and say, no, that's not who we are. Reverse course correct. And he still refuses. Well, how does that make America great? And so I know that the listeners are like, okay, we're on track. I want to have that conversation. And we tied that together because the Washington Post fixed their eyes on Erie for this reason. They recognize that at least with that particular fight, Erie was mirroring the national narrative. And it's not the only area, but we'll unpack that another time. Listen, this has been fun. Always fun to talk with you, Marc. It was great to have Aaron come from behind the microphone or from behind the board and actually chime in and give his 2 cents. And so we are just about out of time, and we got to let you all go for right now. I want to thank you for listening at the end of the show today. Tune in next time for more discussion and more analysis. We'll have local and some national guests. Because now we make our way to the general election. There's a lot of conversation to be had between then and now. Remember, the next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms. So you can find it anywhere you listen to your podcast, and on the 4th Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. on WQLM PBS NPR, which is 91.3 FM. If you want to leave a message, comment, or suggestion, you can call our hotline for next. That is 814-240-8816. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm your host, Marcus Atkinson. Come and join us again so that you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.